Today is Thursday, November 1st, 2007, and this is Tara Waller Lockett and Mary Margaret Bailey, and we're interviewing Ben Harris, Jr., who served as the president of the Alabama State Bar from 1987 to 1988. Good morning, Mr. Harris.
Good morning.
Now, Mr. Harris, how old are you and how long have you been practicing law?
Well, I'm 70 years old, and yesterday I finished my 43rd year practicing law, and I've actually been a lawyer a couple of more years than that, but I was 2 years in the Army in the artillery, lieutenant in artillery for 2 years before I started.
Well, congratulations.
Well, thank you.
Now, where do you practice, and what is the general nature of your law practice?
Well, I practiced with John Stone Adams in Mobile, and I do civil defense litigation, defend civil cases of various kinds.
Where did you grow up, and why did you decide to become a lawyer?
Well, I grew up in Mobile, and I'm not one that just knew from day one I wanted to be a lawyer. In fact, I was in college up at Davidson College in North Carolina, majoring in economics, and my professor indicated I might have an opportunity for a graduate degree and maybe get into college teaching, which sounded interesting. And then Charles Ryan, who was president of the American Bar Association at the time, happened to be at the college and said he talked to people interested in going to law school. Well, I went over there because I kind of had law school in the back of my mind, and I don't know what Mr. Ryan said, but he sure got my attention and sounded like something I'd like to do, and I'm glad I followed up on it.
Obviously, 43 years has been rewarding.
Well, I hope so.
Now, what led you to run for the position of president of the Alabama State Bar?
Well, I was on the State Bar Commission for 9 years, and I was fortunate that several of the presidents asked me to be on the executive committee, and I learned a good bit about the workings of the bar. And at some point I decided, well, I think that's something I can do and I'd like to do, and it was fun and a rewarding experience.
You've held a number of leadership positions, both at the local and state bar levels. You served on the executive committee for the Mobile Bar Association from 1980 to 1986, and as president of the executive committee for the Alabama Law School Foundation from 1992 to 1994. You were also president of the Brock Inn of Court from 1996 to 1998, and you served three-year terms on the Board of Bar Commissioners from 1978 to 1987, and as president of the Alabama Law Foundation from 1988 to 1990. And you're currently chairman of the Attorneys Insurance Mutual of Alabama. You've also held a number of leadership positions in our local community, such as chairman of the UMS Wright Preparatory School Board of Trustees, president of the Mobile Track and Field Association, and president of the Mobile Mental Health Association. What do you consider to be keys to successful leadership?
Well, in spite of all that, I don't consider myself to be an expert, but I think leadership is a dynamic that involves instilling pride, and I think the leader's got to be out front, looking forward, pointing the way. But I think if you get people feeling proud of what they're doing and wanting to be a part of it and sort of feeling an ownership, I think that's got a lot to do with it. And I think that's part of what leadership is. It's really an intangible, I think, but that's my view on it.
Okay, thank you. Now, what do you think are keys to a successful law practice?
Well, I think treating other people with respect is number one. I say that's the key to anything. And I think the word practice says a lot. You practice football to prepare, and you practice law so you're preparing. And you get a reputation, I think, of being a well-prepared lawyer that spreads and leads to a successful practice of law.
Okay, all right, we're rolling.
In talking about the practice of law that it involves preparing, what advice would you give to a young lawyer with regards to preparing for a deposition?
Well, gather every bit of information you possibly can, and you can't over prepare, I don't think. Maybe one time I did, but and when you start asking the questions and you kind of know where you're going, but listen carefully to what the witness says and then follow up on what they say and get them talking on whatever, because a lot of times a witness will inject something that they maybe didn't intend to, and follow where they're going and try to get everything that you wanted to get, but then learn from what the witness is saying and follow up on what you get from that, because you'll get a lot more that way if you listen very carefully to the witness's answers. And sometimes a witness will start to answer a question and then stop and get him to go on and finish that answer.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. Now, what advice do you have for lawyers who are just beginning their law practice?
Well, when I was a young lawyer, I thought old lawyers knew everything, and now I'm an old lawyer. I don't think I know a whole lot more than I did, but I would say always take the high road. It's a long road, and it's a tough road, and there's a lot of stress, and I think you need to know that going in. But also remember that the lawyer on the other side is feeling that same stress you are, which kind of balances it. But I think you need to know that. I had a lawyer in Birmingham in more vivid terms tell me about that when I was in law school, and it certainly proved to be true.
Are there any specific habits that you would recommend?
To a young lawyer?
Yes, sir.
This may sound unusual, but I say physical exercise. I think you need to be in shape to practice football. You need to be in shape to practice law. I think exercise clears your mind, and also it helps helps relieve some of that stress. So that's it's not legally related, but I think it helps you as a lawyer.
Okay. Now, what pitfalls do you believe face new lawyers, and how can they avoid them?
Well, I think I've hit most of the pits, so I ought to be an expert on this, but I think don't let it consume you, and it can do that. But make time for family, make time for recreation, make time to get involved in your community and your bar, and it will all work out. But that, and then also don't take on something that you know you're not qualified to do. Refer it out, and if you'll find that if you refer things out, referrals will start coming back your way, and you can build a law practice like that, and rather than get yourself in trouble by trying to handle something you're not yet qualified to do.
Good advice. Now, what is the best thing you ever did with regard to your law practice?
Oh, golly, you hope you've done something good. I think maybe my very first client, who was a civil service employee with the federal government, was about to lose or had lost his job, and I took his case on, and after about a 2-year battle, we saved his job, and he went on to a successful career. And I have a few long-time pro bono clients that I've done things for over the years that I guess would be considered good.
Can you share something that is unique or historical about the circuit in which you practice?
Well, I think we have the 14th oldest bar association in the United States. And Mobile being founded by the French in 1702, they practiced French law and then English law and Spanish law. And I think at one point when the English were in charge, which was at the time of the American Revolution, that they would practice English civil law and French criminal law. And connected with that, a lot of people don't know that there were really 15 colonies, English colonies, including East and West Florida. And Mobile was in West Florida, and one of the patriots from one of the other colonies came down to Mobile with a copy of the Declaration of Independence. And I guess they gave the fellow some kind of legal hearing, but they put him in jail. So I guess we had Tories down here in Mobile at the time of the Revolution. But I've always thought that was interesting.
Very. Can you tell us about your recollections of a significant legal event in your circuit?
Well, well, there've been a number, some would involve personalities I wouldn't want to get into. I think one of the things was the case, it was actually in federal court, that changed our form of city government from a 3-person commission elected at large to a city council form of government where the council members are elected by district, which allows for minority representation in the city government. And I think Mobile is beginning to prosper at this point, and I think that certainly had something to do with it that came out of the legal arena. And I would like to say one other thing. It's not an event maybe, but the establishment of the Mobile Pro Bono program, which has been recognized as one of the best in the United States, is providing legal services for those that can't afford it. And I think Mobile maybe does one of the best jobs in the United States, and I just wanted to put in a plug for that.
Can you tell me about your recollections of a memorable lawyer in this circuit?
Well, there's certainly been a lot of them. I guess Mr. Harry Seal, who was a very good trial lawyer, both in civil and criminal cases. And one time I had defending a civil case that had a criminal part to it. And so I went to police court with Mr. Harry. And after the hearing, he had somewhere else to go, but he said, if you'll come by my office, I'll give you my notes. And so I got to Mr. Harry's office pretty fast, and I went in, and the room was kind of dark, and he was sitting at his desk with one of those green visors on, and we chatted for a few minutes. Then he handed me his notes, which were on a yellow pad, legal pad, and they were verbatim of everything that was said in the police court hearing, and he had taken those notes standing up. They were very neat, in order, and they were a great help to me in the civil case, but I was just amazed at his ability to do that. And that was certainly a memorable experience. So.
Where did you go to law school, and what was your most memorable experience at law school?
Well, I went to the University of Alabama School of Law, and criminal law, first semester, my roommate was up giving McNaughton's case, which has to do with insanity as defense. And he got about halfway through, and the professor said, you don't know a rat's behind. He used a little stronger language than that, and said, get out of here. And he chased us all out of the classroom. Well, I went to the library, and I read everything there was to read on McNaughton's case. Well, we go back to class the next day, and we barely get in our seats, and first thing I hear is Benjamin Harris, and I can hear that to this day. I got up and said about 3 words, and the professor said, sit down. And I thought, well, I might as well go home because I'm not going to make it. But I stayed, and I guess it was part of the law school initiation process, but that was certainly memorable.
Now, who was a lawyer who most influenced you, and what interesting stories do you recollect of that?
Well, a lot of lawyers have, and certainly in my firm, Charlie Johnstone and Bob Adams, Charlie Bailey, Ellick Howard. Worked a lot with Ellick Howard, and first week I was practicing on Friday, he said, come on, go to motion docket with me. And I thought, great, I'm going to see lawyers argue and see judges. And got about halfway down there, and Ellick handed me 3 files, and he said, here, you argue these. And I started trying to do a quick study, going to the courthouse, and got down there and did a little bit more. And somehow I managed to be successful on 2 out of the 3 in 3 different courtrooms. And they obviously couldn't have been too important cases for Ellick to give them to me. But then a few years later, I was helping him on a jury case, and I'd done a good bit of the work, but he was going to try it. We got down to the courthouse, and he said, I'm sick, I got to go home. Here's the file, you try the case. So I tried the case, and luckily it came out okay. And so I guess that was a learning experience for me.
Sounds like it. Now, can you tell us something of the most interesting case you've handled?
Probably it was an oil and gas case that involved an alleged widespread kickback scheme in the oil fields, at least natural gas fields up northeast of Mobile. And we took over 100 depositions in that case, so you ran across every kind of personality you can imagine. We even took the deposition of 2 witnesses at one time, which was it was hard to keep a straight face while we were doing that, but that was an interesting case because we got a good result, which always makes cases more interesting.
What is your most memorable or humorous in-court experience?
Well, memorable would be I was trying a case that involved suicide, and about the 3rd day of the trial, I called the coroner, who was getting up in age, and asked the critical question. I can't remember what the question was exactly, but as I was asking the question, the whole jury stood up like a choir standing up in church, and they stood. And the coroner answered the question, but he answered it just backwards from what he told me beforehand, and then he corrected himself, and the jury remained standing for that whole time, and then, which was certainly memorable. And as far as humorous, I was co-defending a case one time with Tom Galloway and Bubba Marsall, who was a great trial lawyer in Mobile, better with jurors than probably anybody that's come along, and was a plaintiff's lawyer. And about the 2nd day of the trial, Bubba, for some reason, said, I have never represented a defendant. Well, Tom jumps up and says, oh, yes, you have. And they got into an argument over whether or not Bubba had ever represented a defendant, and I was luckily standing near the door to the hallway that led to the judge's chambers, and I ducked in there, and because I was laughing so hard. And I didn't want the jury to see me laughing, and I got control of myself, came back out, and Tom and I got hit kind of hard on that case, so maybe that argument had something to do with it, but what, I don't know. But it was funny.
What was your scariest legal experience, whether it be in law school, the bar exam, or in your practice?
Well, I was scared the whole first semester of law school, that's for sure. And going into the first exam, torts exam, we were kind of lined up single file going into the door of the classroom. And the fellow about 2 in front of me passed out and fell on the floor, and a little blood was coming out of his mouth. Well, we just kept on going and stepped over him and went on in. I guess we were all so scared about the exam, and to this day, I don't know who that was or what happened to him, but that added to my already existing fear. And then in court, after I'd been practicing a few months, I was assigned to defend a criminal case that involved the death penalty. And there was a young boy, and I guess I was a boy too. I wasn't a heck of a lot older than he was, but he was barely old enough to be tried as an adult. And it involving the death penalty, and we were seated there, and the judge told the jury that this case included the, death by electrocution. And he looked at me, and I looked at him, and I saw the fear in his eyes, and I know he saw the fear in my eyes, and I think I maybe was more scared than he was. But luckily, a U.S. Supreme Court case had just come out, the Miranda case, and we were able to get him off and won the case. But that when you hear that death by electrocution for the first time and sitting there, it's scary. Was to me, anyway.
What changes have you observed in the practice of law since you were admitted in 1962 that you consider to have had the most profound impact on the legal system or the law?
Oh, God. Well, of course, one thing, there's so many more lawyers, and then so many more women lawyers, female lawyers, which I think has definitely been a profound and good impact. Going back quite a number of years, but we used to use common law pleading, and it switched to notice pleading, which I think greatly expanded the type cases that could be filed, and that's probably been a good development. Although defending, I found the common law system helpful a lot of times. And then I guess lawyer advertising is change that when I was at State Bar, we were involved in trying to fight that. The Kentucky bar took the lead, and we were a lot of bars were helping, but the U.S. Supreme Court said the First Amendment applies to lawyers just like everybody else, and that's the law. So be it. That's it.
Mr. Harris, it has been a pleasure meeting you today. Thank you for talking with us and giving us your words of wisdom.
Well, it's been my pleasure, and if there was any wisdom there, let me know what it was. So, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good job.